Welcome to Promote, Profit, Publish. I'm your host, Juliet Clark, and I think this is going to be a fun episode today. Our guest and I are going to do a little character building, and in a very unique way. So I think it'll be a good one for fiction authors as well as nonfiction to listen to. Before we get started with his introduction, remember to go over and grab your free subscription of Breakthrough Author Magazine. Lots of tips, anywhere from writing clear up to book promotion. So wherever you are in the process, it should be able to help you. The magazine is a great source of resource for a lot of authors. So today's guest is Mack Griffin. And Mack's vision at Mack Griffin VO LLC is that he is a veterans-based business, independently run voiceover and character developed business that provides various services to authors and publishing companies. He also works with media and marketing companies nationwide and in the UK with their voiceover services to give life to their clients' messages and emotionally connect with their target market. His goal is to create a voiceover for digital marketing plans and audiobooks and a legend of thoroughly fleshed out characters with background stories and a worldwide podcast platform to help promote unknown and newly published authors. So this is going to be kind of fun today because, and I'll share a little bit more when we get into the episode, I have been working on my first fiction novel in about 12 years. And I got going on it last January, got a little bit into it, and then spoke to an art expert who questioned the premise of my story. He thought it was very controversial. And I'll give him that. I let it get under my skin. So, I've been looking for another avenue in, and I was really excited when I met Mack because he validated my original thought and actually added a lot to the characters that I hadn't really thought about before. So a whole different angle that was really quite interesting. So stay tuned. Mack is next, and I think you're really going to enjoy this. Mack, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. I think this will be a lot of fun. Our phone call was really, really fun. But before we get started in kind of I'll call it role playing. I don't know if it's actually role playing. That sounds a little bit sexual, but we're gonna develop some characters here. I know. Don't tell your wife we're role playing, please. So
I would definitely not do that. I like the lid.
Tell us a little bit about how you got started.
So I got started just by acting, honestly. I grew up in the theater. I started be on stage when I was 14, started singing when I was 6, went to school for it, and then it just went downhill from there for a while because I went into the military. Well, I wasn't using the gift. I'm sorry. Forgive me. But it was just one of those things that I just didn't think I needed to use anymore. And then back in 2019, I met a group of geeks and nerds and fun-loving people that enjoyed creating stories and playing Dungeons and Dragons, and they needed a dungeon master. So I said, sure, I'll do it. And I basically started creating ever since then, and it hasn't stopped. So
that is fantastic. So you guys, we were on the phone last week. Julie Loken introduced us. Mm-hmm. And I was telling Mack about that I had started writing what I called Ellie's Lie I've had the idea for like 2 years. And I really appreciated Mack's expertise because 2 of the people I ran the story by were ex-CIA and NSA for, they can't share, but they can share. They've been there. And I started to get into the story a little bit, and they were both like, I would read that. And so the story kept percolating. I haven't written a new fiction novel in 12 years. And so I got into the story, and the story is a little bit of Nazi Germany. There is art that is stolen. And so I spoke to an art expert on a particular painter. And I told him a little bit of the background story, and he was critical of it. And I think I shared this with you, Mac, that he was a little bit critical of the premise of the story. So, and he thought it was very controversial. So, and I'm not even sure why I pulled back. And I went to Pennsylvania, and I was running it by my relatives, and they proposed some other storylines, but the other storylines just didn't feel right to me. And one of them was about that Nazi Germany was very against homosexuality. And we were thinking about introducing a lesbian aspect to the story, but I felt like, I'm not gay. So it just like, I couldn't muster like what's real.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So, so anyway, I ran it by Mac when he was telling me that he did this development, and I was so intrigued by everything he came up with. I'm actually thinking of resurrecting the book now that yay, I know.
Yay.
So I want to talk a little bit about it. Okay. So the book is called Ellie's Lie, and it is basically a 14-year-old young lady who is Jewish. Her family's Jewish. They have a house that they've had artwork that has come through generational wealth, and her parents are taken away. And this whole family, you and I discussed, they already had a pre-plan. She had money. She knew who to contact. Like they had this plan for their children. And then on the other side of this was our character, Klaus. And Klaus actually is a German soldier. But you brought some great new depth to him. I mean, I can't even imagine. Like it's just been chewing on it since. So let's start with Ellie, 14-year-old Ellie. She is Jewish. They live in the Netherlands, and the Nazis come. Well, she's out in the backyard. The Nazis come. They pick up her parents and they steal. They basically loot the house. And she's in her hiding place. So let's talk a little bit about what is Ellie like and how does she escape?
Okay, so when it comes to Ellie, there's a variety of ways that we could always play it. You could always play it as the innocent ingenue and just learning and understanding the way people perceive Jewish people in general. So there's a variety of different ways that we run it. We could also look at her intelligence. Okay, you see that she did. You said that she came from wealth, generational wealth. So in my mind, when I hear the word generational wealth, I hear it brings up to me good education. So there's got to be a lot of books, which majority of the if you look at a lot of the records of things that were taken by the Nazis, many of these families that had generational wealth had a ton of books. So, and plus reading at that time was the entertainment. If it wasn't music, it was books. So for me, I can always see her as someone who, even at the age of 14, has the understanding of, okay, we have a lot of books. I'm interested in books. But then we also have to look at, to me, let's look at her parents. Let's look at the grandparents. Because I always believe that if you go back at least 3 generations, you're going to find everything that you're doing right now started with them, or even further. But I always just do 3 because it makes it a lot easier. Plus, you don't have to create so many different personalities in your head. It's like, okay, which one do I keep? So for me, if I see someone has a lot of books, a lot of wealth, that means that they have some type of employment, or they are in charge of people as a manager, or they own a company. So figuring out the traditions, figuring out what the roles were. So Dad most likely would have been, again, we're talking probably around 1910, 1920-ish for the perspective of him starting his career.
Yeah, and he's actually a doctor. That's where they're
that makes it even better for me. Yeah, that makes it even easier for me. What is Mom? What's her role?
Just a housewife, but educated. She's an educated housewife.
She's an educated woman. Okay. Does she is she involved in the community in some way, shape, or form?
Oh, that's such a great, interesting, because we don't really talk about Mom and Dad much in the book. Right. I don't know. I hadn't developed that. I think up to that point where I talk about them being taken away, it's interesting that you said that about 3 generations. Because the main piece of art that was taken that is so valuable today was actually something that went even further back, that artist was not well known at that time, but they kept it because it was of a family member. So interesting. So I think it even goes back a little further on that. So I didn't get much into Mom and Dad's character development other than the fact that, doctors, and they had, these artifacts that had, I guess artifacts is probably the best word, that had come through generations. Some were valuable, some they didn't see as valuable, but they were valuable.
Right. So the reason why I always look at the parents and the grandparents and the great-grandparents is because, again, we're looking at the nurture versus nature. We're looking at the external environment and how that character connects and interacts with them. Same thing with Claus. There's always something there. So if we see that Dad is a doctor, he's part of the community in some way, shape, or form. Do you know what type of doctor that you wanted him to be? Was it something? Was he a surgeon? Was he a general family physician? What's your thoughts on that?
I think back then they pretty much did it all, didn't they? I mean, back in that,
there was actually there were some specialties. Okay. Yeah, there were some specialties. Majority of it was just majority of them, yes, were just your general family physician. But there were those that were surgeons. There were those that were just specifically working with handmaids. To just confirm everything was good with them, even though handmaids pretty much did everything at that time. But so if we say that, we say that he's a general physician, he's a family doctor. Okay. If he's a family doctor, that means that the community knows of him, right? At least in a certain region, a certain area. So let me ask you this, in terms of where they were coming from, where they lived at the time. Is it a big village? Is it a town, city? Where did they specifically live at?
I believe at that time it was a smaller sort of, well, actually it might have been a seaport. I think I put a seaport in there. I looked at the map. So that's a great question. How big? Now it's large.
Right, yeah.
How big was it then? So, that's something to definitely consider.
So if it's a seaport, if it's a smaller seaport, a fishery, just a small fishing town, then most likely everybody knew him. He was most likely the only doctor within that town. So that gives a little bit more insight on how the community looks at him. Then you have to understand and look at the process of how did he take payments? Because there's a variety of ones that, were very open. They were very happy just to be there to help. That's all they cared to do was just help. They didn't worry about money. So some people, it was, hey, I can't pay you, but I can at least give you food, or I can give you this item over here. So when you're looking at their collection in their house, is there a lot of trinkets that were from the community themselves as payment? Or was it something more of, hey, I saw this in the store and I really liked it, and thankfully because of either we had enough money to pay for it, then we've got something there, we can go get it? Or was it, I went in the store, thankfully the the store owner you've been working with and been taking care of him, and he saw that I really liked it, so he gave it to me as a payment. So when you look at the way that people interact and react to certain things within the family, then it makes it a lot easier to understand the psychology and the emotions of your character themselves. So for me, for time restraints, we'll say that the community, he's only doctor within the community, and everybody just either pays him with money if they can, and if they can't, then he does accept something else like food, trinkets here and there. And that's why when you look at the house, there's a lot of books. There's a lot of little trinkets here and there, excuse me. So that would really give you an insight on why there are so many books, why that maybe our protagonist looks at the books a certain way. Maybe there were friends that she really liked, or it was because there was a certain memory attached to that. And that's why certain things hold true to the way that we react if we can't get to it. So if there's a family portrait, there's a memory attached to that. There is a certain emotion attached to that. And that is why when we go later on into the story that we were talking about, that's why it's so important. It's not just because it came from her grandparents or her great-grandparents. There is a specific reason why she is so attached to this. Maybe it was her father's favorite portrait because there was a certain meaning to it at that point. Maybe it was something her mother it was from her mother's side, not her father's side. And so maybe because of, again, the traditions, the Jewish traditions during that time, I'm not an expert on it, but I do know the basics in certain cultures. So in the Jewish form, there was a lot of tradition of you had to have a dowry when you got married, because it was something that just helped to set them up for success, or at least give them a good baseline to work with when they got together. So maybe that portrait was a part of the family. Maybe it was part of the dowry itself. So there's a lot of little things like that. So again, the interaction of Ellie to her dad, were they close? Were they not close? Was he more of very harsh, very stern, or was he very outgoing, loving, caring? And he would do anything for people around him, around his daughters, his family in general, and then look at his wife. So again, very traditional life at that time. The wife, the mother, Ellie's mother, may have been very, she may have been probably the same way. And so maybe she helped out her husband when he was doing certain things. Maybe she was a nurse at some point as well, because even a handmaid would have gotten married. Not all the time. It wasn't like it wasn't possible. Majority of them just didn't get married. But even if she was a handmaid at one point, maybe that's the reason why people know them so much and love them, because they brought in most of the new population, most of the population within this town. So there's a lot of things when you look at these characters, you have to understand how they are perceived within the family as well as perceived outside of the family. How much of an impact are their lives to the people within the world, except as well as outside of the world. So in this case, outside the house, excuse me. So this all has an impact on Ellie and how she reacts to people and how she interacts with people. Even if she comes from a traditional house and maybe not be told that she can't talk a lot, that she has to listen, or maybe there was a point where she got polio or something to that effect that made her not talk as much, or she was hard of hearing. You have to look at a lot of these little things that were going on during that time and see if you want to let that affect her or not. If it affects her, how does she get over that? How does she make that an empowerment instead of a disability? So even if she was sick at one point, maybe her father was always there, making sure she was good. But maybe at some point, she couldn't talk for a while. Maybe she had laryngitis. And during that time, he may have gotten the idea of saying, look, I know you can't talk right now, but maybe this is a good thing because you are such a chatterbox. You love talking to people. Maybe this is the time that you can learn how to listen and to grow as a person and grow as a future wife, as a sister, as a daughter. But also you can look and perceive how people react to certain things around them. So maybe this gives her an insight of, okay, I can do this. My dad, he's the world to me. This is something I love to do. This is something I need to do. So maybe she does that a lot. And all of a sudden now she's gotten into the habit of not being a chatterbox much. Now she listens a lot more and is able to really appreciate other people's ideas and how they react. And she sees all this, and maybe now she has a love for psychology. Maybe she has a love of just human behavior. So now we have a possible trait for her to say, okay, she is very perceivable of everybody around her. And even though she knows somebody's lying to her, she wants to see how far this goes. Maybe one of the little things that she has is like she really loves to just watch people and see them falter until the point where she can go to them saying, I know you're lying to me, and it's fine.
Yeah.
But I want to know why you were lying to me. Was it because of fear? Was it maybe because you just felt like you were embarrassed? And then trying to help them from that. Maybe that's another thing that you could perceive as when it comes to her and her interaction with other children. Maybe she doesn't interact with them as much because she doesn't seem to think of them as interesting as adults. Mm-hmm. So she may be considered, the introvert, the bookworm of this village, even though she's well known. Maybe people just don't look at her that way. Or yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so Ellie's lie, like the lie is not revealed till the end. So right. I feel like that probably doesn't really go to the heart of what we're trying to do, but a lot of it does. So interesting, you brought up like when she escapes, when the Germans come and they take mom and dad away, and the whole escape was trapdoor, chicken coop. So you just brought up an interesting, like, being able to say that her father got, paid with chickens because she could come out and say, oh my gosh, we have 4 new chickens. And how are we ever going to get in that trapdoor? So there are ways to say that without saying dad took payment in chickens.
Exactly.
So I like that part. I also can envision when the soldiers are searching the property that she has a hard time being in that space underneath the chicken coop, being able to hear what's going on outside because the chickens are so loud because they're disturbed. So that definitely adds some to the story. So you guys, can you see how fun this is when you're actually laying out characters? Now, here's what I loved about Klaus. We talked a little bit about Klaus last week, and Klaus is a German soldier. He's part of this, he does what he's told. But you brought up something last week that was so intriguing. I always envision Klaus as this really hard guy. Mm-hmm. And, the part of the lie is that he's brought over being a German soldier as part of, what did they call it? Operation Paperclip, which a lot of people don't know. The CIA brought a lot of Nazi soldiers into the United States after the war. Mm-hmm. So, I've got that down about they brought him because of his Russian, but he also had some, some war crimes there that nobody knows about. But you brought in this part of the story where I always envisioned him being very hard. And you brought in the part that he really loved Ellie. So he didn't want to tell her the truth. He was afraid he'd lose her. I never thought of that part of the story. I always thought of it as being hard. You know, he was a spy. So talk a little bit about that, because I love that you brought in the lies and the fear, because as the book goes along, you know, the kind of the premise is Ellie doesn't know she's been lied to. Klaus knows there's a lie, and their life ends up being a lie, but she doesn't know that until a big event happens and it's in her face.
Yeah. So for me, when I look at even any type of love interest or antagonist or I can't even say it, deuter and antagonist, I have to figure out what makes them tick, what in their lifespan, just like Ellie, makes them act and react a certain way that they do. What is their upbringing? So as we're looking at him as a very strong, very stern-faced soldier, there's also the aspect of that generation of, even if they were stern on the outside, a lot of times they had at least one little thing that made them just as soft as the teddy bear in a little child's hands. There's always at least something. So we have to figure out what that little thing is. And then we react, okay, so why is he not like that anymore? What made him so stern? Was it the fact that this thing was taken away from him? Or was he turned because somebody told him these people were going to come take this away from him, and that's why he was so eager to step up as a soldier?
Right.
So when you can figure out what the thing that people are reacting to, in this case with Nazis, a lot of times it was just, we're trying to create this superhuman generation, and we need to get rid of all the inferior races, the inferior religions, the thoughts. And again, of course, we all know that there was a lot of propaganda against the Jews at that time. So what was it that really turned his thoughts on, oh, I have to hate these Jews right now. I have to hate them so much because of this.
But I was going to ask you that, but because I know you're such a historian of war, military and war that we talked about. Does Klaus, did he join them because he had to? Was there an alternative to not joining, being a young man in Nazi Germany? Or was there a choice?
There wasn't really a choice. It was just the reasoning in general. Some of it was just because of the labor laws that were going through, the things that were happening nationwide. The main reason why World War II happened in the first place was because of the Black Tuesday, which was 1929 and started the Great Depression. But the reason why it actually started in Germany in 1933. And the only reason why it did was because France called in all their IOUs, and Germany owed them a lot of money. So a lot of the funds that were supposed to go to the people, go to the industries within Germany, were no longer getting that money. So all that money was going back to France and to pay for the debts. And that's one of the major reasons why Germany went directly after France, because they were the reason why this all started. The Jews were just simply an excuse to clear out the way, per se.
The scapegoats of their time.
Scapegoats. Exactly. They were really scapegoats. That's all they were. They had nothing to do with the war. They had nothing to do with really anything in regards to the Nazi Party. Personally, obviously, in regards to Adolf Hitler, it was when he was younger, he was told he could never be an artist. And unfortunately, the person who told him that was Jewish. So he held that grudge. And to him, that was it. That was the reason why. All these Jews are taking all the money. You could see it because they worked in France. They're in all these high towers. That's the reason why we're struggling so much. So in regards to Klaus, it could have been something that had happened to his father or his mother. You know, they could have had some good jobs, but then all of a sudden they lost everything. Mm-hmm. So it could be anything from revenge to survivability to the government is calling you to be a part of this. You're going to do it.
Right.
So those are basically the only reasons why people would really do that is the hatred or the fear. That's the only two major reasons why. Mm-hmm. Volunteering was pretty much being voluntold. You were voluntold by your family. Or if you felt like you needed to make a change in the way that you as a specific caste within your community, within your nation, your class, your rank was treated, if you felt like you were just being stepped on because of somebody else, just because they were better with math, better with schooling, whatever the case may be, you want to get rid of them so you can become that part and you can get the opportunities that you were supposed to have. So there's all kinds of little things that you could put with that.
Yeah. So you guys listening, I know we don't have a lot of time left on here, but I think you can see working with Mack could really bring out the possibilities in your story. And just like, I didn't even pay him. He volunteered to give me some information. And I thought, wow, this really transformed where it was going. And the brilliant part of this is, you guys, that when Chris Johnson, our book developer, when she gets fiction novels, that is her number one complaint, is that, you know, these characters haven't been developed. And I think they become, instead of writing that show versus tell, they become talking heads. Mm-hmm. So there's ways like, well, I was just talking about the chickens where, you know, you can emphasize that they have too many chickens from just the conversation. Maybe, you know, the doctor walks in the door with 2 chickens under his arms and his wife says, more chickens? You know, yeah. How many chicken dinners can we have? So you guys can see how really powerful it can be working with someone like Mack on a fiction novel and really getting that development. I mean, I can see you like with your own little ancestry, you know, family tree, writing all of this out and creating documents and, you know, kind of like, have you ever used Ancestry where you can go back and see like the graves, or you can see, you know, newspapers articles or stuff like that. It's funny, on Ancestry, I actually have a relative that there is like no information about. It's pretty funny. All I have is a name on a birth certificate, but if you go to actually find him, it's almost impossible. So, Matt, where can we find you if we want to work with you or talk to you a little bit more about character development?
So first place you can always go to see me is my website, mackgriffinvo.com, MackGriffin, V as in Victor, O as in Oscar.com. And if you want to listen to or read some of the samples of my work, you can put that / character development. And at the bottom, I have 3 samples of the way that I look at things. First one is for a character and her family bloodline. The second one is for a fictional event that I created for one of my stories that has an impact on the character. And then the last one I have is a little bit of fantasy lore that I created for my friends a long time ago, but I still look at it as inspiration to really set the tone for a prologue for your stories. The other place, and it has all my links and everything, all my social media links on there as well. But you can also listen to me on Beyond the Pen podcast. Me and my friend Marcella, my sister from another mister, we interview unknown and newly published authors to tell us about themselves, their books, but most importantly, the story behind the story. So that little area between the ink and the paper, that whole little area right there of intent. And you can hear us every Tuesday morning at 5 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on your favorite podcasting platform. We're on over 45 plus platforms right now. And we are always just wanting to be able to help and support as many authors as possible to get their name out there. If you go to my Instagram, which is at Beyond the Pen Pod, you will notice that I have a couple of videos that I've done within this past week that just deal with characters and how to look at them from a different perspective, from an actor's point of view instead of a writing point of view. So I've talked everything about what a foil does, a foil/contrast, and examples, as well as why it's so important to have that. Same thing with the love interest and some other things that I've done on there. I've even created a couple of examples of characters just randomly. And yes, by the way, when I create characters, I roll dice to answer every little question that I have. And that's the joy. That's the great way of improving and really challenging your own writing, is to ask certain questions about whatever you're writing, roll the dice, and even if it doesn't go the way that you would like it to, see how you can make it work and see where it leads you. And that's pretty much everything that I do.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much for being on the show today. It was a pleasure spiffing Ellie's Ellie's destination here.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.